Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today, my guests, I have back with me again Liam Dell, and I have a third guest today, another good friend of mine. He has a degree in accounting and a minor in finance and marketing. He has also been a social worker, and he's one of the nicest guys I know. Please welcome Luke Kenneally.
Home audio entertainment.
9016 Radio.
The show for artists of all kinds.
Sit down, relax, enjoy the music.
Oh, okay. Oh, now it's your turn.
We're live. We're live.
Yeah, cheers, boys.
Yep.
Cheers,
Chin.
boys.
That's quite a contrasting mix of drinks we have there, but
Milk,
that's
water,
what it is.
You know, you play the hand you dealt, don't you?
So who's letting Elon Musk put a Neuralink chip in their head?
Well,
Have you heard about this, Luke?
I haven't heard about this.
So part of, I don't know if Neuralink is the brand that he owns or whether it's just a product that he is
think it's the
affiliated with, but he has this thing where he thinks we can have Neuralink chips, he's calling it, like surgically implanted into our brain to serve all kinds of purposes. You can take phone calls and listen to music and that sort of thing. I think there's a bit of skepticism going around at the moment about the validity of it all, how it's actually going to affect human performance. One of the things I watched this morning was related to can you listen to music through it and how it would actually work, seeing as like how your ears sort of catch audio from the outside, how does an internal system
Retain
actually
it.
sort of produce audio to your
What
brain?
is the
I thought that was
quality,
fascinating.
you know?
Well, that was the thing. These
is
are all just sort of, this is all up in the air at the moment. It's not really defined. I don't know how far along he is with it, but it's something he's sort of working towards. It's,
yeah. Well,
interesting. Would you, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with
wouldn't.
someone doing surgery in my head to put a chip in it.
well, the funny thing about it is, it's not like I guess the product will rely on those first innovators to pick it up, and then everyone else wants to get in on it because they feel left behind, and then that becomes a generational thing.
Yeah, right.
But like, I'm the kind of person that's inclined. We were just talking about before about buying a record player from 1980 and
Yeah.
and having all these older things. I don't, I'm not anti-technology. I'm just not. I wouldn't be one of those first adopters. I don't think even when it became popular, I don't know that I would change my mind then either, because I just prefer
It's still
to
something,
keep
just
the
keep
monitoring,
things natural.
which is the monitoring thing. It's not from like a conspiracy, like they're going to be monitoring everything I think or say, whatever.
Well, that's
but
exactly
that is
that,
something
man.
that could happen.
If people are tapping your phones right now, what's to say someone couldn't start tapping into you if you've got something hardwired into you, you know? Yeah. But depends how far, I guess, in they would have it. If it's something sort of on the surface, you might be able to just freaking yank that out. That just doesn't sound right at all.
Yeah.
But think of the possibilities it could hold. But I just can't get my head around how you would actually sort of hear these things. It must obviously be linked up to receptors that your ears are sort of linked to your brain, so you're perceiving the sound internally. But it's still
It would be very complicated, and also I feel like the health dangers of that, of having any kind of foreign body in your own system that didn't actually occur there, that wasn't grown by your cells or anything like that, is always can be dangerous. It's like people being like, you don't want a generation of a laptop on your laps, prostate cancer, the cell phones next to your heads. If that hasn't fully run its path, we don't know. We're the generation and the generation before us are going to be the ones that are dealing with those issues in their 40s, 50s, 60s. What would a chip inside your brain do?
We seem to be the
over
guinea
50
pigs
years.
for all of the things like this. But to even get something like that started, you're going to have people that are willing to have that procedure done to them.
And there would
you
be.
even consider something
There
like
would be,
that?
though.
Absolutely. And thinking about the relationship we'd like to have with technology, would I like to be permanently attached to technology? Probably not.
Yeah.
I like having a
It is
laptop
freaky,
that I can put away and be
done with it
external
at the end of the day. It becomes a point where you're just not really human anymore. Like that's the start of like a cyborg sort of thing.
But that's the thing. I mean, I've had conversations with people where people look at me funny for saying this, but I feel like, there's certain phases in, human society, like, the civil rights movement is a very rightly fought battle for equal rights for people of certain races or people of certain backgrounds, religion, whatever. And then a second phase of that, in a way, is like, transgender rights, what constitutes gender, etc. What's to say 50, 60 years from now, even less, people who have over half of their body is cybernetic, or what quantifies them as being a human then, or a cyborg, and will that be the next kind of social battle where people who have large majority of their body cybernetic parts and they identify as a cyborg, quote unquote, or whatever the term might be? That could definitely be something that culture will juggle in the next foreseeable future.
That's definitely a topic of which there's going to be hugely right-wing and left-wing people. Like, there's going to be
politicize it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and something as large as that, something as next, like in human development, is going to be talked about to no end. But
and the other part of that is where that technology comes from. Like obviously, Elon Musk's company, it will be based in like Silicon Valley or California or somewhere like that in the States. But that technology and the plants where they make those technologies will be in China or in Southeast Asia, and that's already a politicized issue in economics now, is things that aren't don't have anything to do with technology, are purely to do with supply chain management or whatever globally. People are already kind of rallying against China, and like you say, if it becomes a politicized issue, that's the annoying thing about everything nowadays, like COVID. It's something that isn't actually political in any way. Yeah. It's a disease, an airborne disease that you can't. It doesn't have ownership by any political ideology or anything. But people are like, oh, if I'm left wing, I'm adhering to wearing a mask or social distancing, and if I'm right wing, I'm adhering to don't take away my rights. I'm not going to wear a mask in public. Fuck you, kind of thing. Yeah.
Talking about big businessmen, I can't remember if it was Elon Musk or Bill Gates gave a lecture on a virus which will infect our population, which we won't be ready for.
That was Bill Gates' TED Talk.
Bill Gates' TED Talk, and it basically explains the coronavirus.
Scary, eh?
It is scary.
But at the same time, that is a good talk, and obviously what he's talking about is very pertinent. But that it's not insane to have foreseen this coming anyway, because the comparison they make to it when it first started out was the 1918 Spanish influenza, which is incorrectly named, by the way. It's
how so?
Well, it's called the Spanish influenza, but it doesn't really have anything to do with Spain. A lot of it might have started in Spain, but a lot of the spreading of that disease came from people who had picked up their immune systems had dropped in the trenches during trench warfare in World War One, come home in ships which are completely filled to the brim with soldiers, like fully packed with thousands of soldiers. They all disembark after engaging with each other, drinking, fighting or whatever, doing whatever they're doing. They've probably spread it amongst themselves on that ship, and then they went to all corners of America, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, yada yada, and that's how it spread so fast.
Well, that's just like the COVID-19. It's not a Chinese virus.
No, it's not the China flu.
It came from China, but it's not a Chinese flu, as it has been referred to.
It's like when people say, it's like how, if Brazil and the US are the two ones struggling with it the most, when does it become the US's flu?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Well, basically is at the moment.
Well, people are going to look back on it and be like, wait, hey, remember how those countries that were run by far right / almost autocratic leaders completely struggled with this disease, and other countries that didn't, And then people will look back and they'll be like, oh, remember when that fucking weird ass guy with plastic hair and an orange face was running the United States, and 10% of the population died from it.
Yeah,
or 10% not now.
He didn't take a virus seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's easy to look past it as well. Or I think it plays into the fear side of things. Like you don't want to believe it, and I think that's what a lot of what is happening in America. Like you think at how much the lockdown affected this country, and that was only 4 weeks. You think about what they've had to be doing in America. They've just been locked down for,
but they haven't been doing
longer
it
than that. But that's my point. Is that they are supposed to be in this for as long as they have, since it started, but no one wants to be in that situation for that long. It gets to a point where Americans especially are like, oh, this is a free country, I'll do what I want, so they will just start doing that. So it was inevitable that was going to happen. There's no way a virus like that could be contained in a country as crazy as America,
Yeah, we're all in this together. Like, this virus affects all countries, as we've seen, and it goes to show the countries who have been onto it early and taken the measures you need to prevent the spread of the virus. It has worked, and then other countries like America, who were quite slow to get onto it
Yeah,
have suffered.
And to your point, Liam, about it being a political issue, the COVID thing, whether it is or it isn't, it plays into a political side of things. And I had Casey on the podcast yesterday, and we were talking about how leadership or people in politics that aren't in the leadership side of things will talk against the people that are saying things that are appropriate or things that are working, and that ties into sort of how countries are not divided, but how the leadership actually comes into play, because there's people that sort of are in somewhat, or at least are in a parliament or government or whatever, but they sort of have to play the part of the opposition of whoever's in power. So it ends up being this contradictory fuck where you should actually all be really working together. Like, this is serious. This is something that's really damaging and killing people.
But we live in a liberal democracy where, you know, at the end of the day, the party that would have been most opposed to this is the party in opposition, e.g. the National Party. Yeah. And they're a centre in the United States. That's a centre. They would be considered a left-wing party. You know what I mean? Like, the United States doesn't have anything close to left-wing politics in New Zealand. You know, the Democratic Party would be the National Party here, and the Republican Party is like the Conservative Party.
Seems to be the way it's going. Yeah.
It just
how it's turning out.
Well, they're just, you know. But anyway, should we not?
Luke, do you want to light up the cigar that you've brought in here for
politics.
us?
Yeah, what do you reckon about that?
Teach us the ways.
I wouldn't.
I presume there's
myself.
nothing else you have to do with that. You don't have to chop it off. It's not a traditional.
Nah, it won't
be.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Not that fancy.
But yeah, something I can't
light them up.
Get my head around is only bum puffing the cigar.
Yeah, don't inhale it.
Not inhaling
really
the cigar.
I've made that mistake a few too many times. Yeah, I think got it, bro.
Yeah, and I couldn't imagine that would be super tasty. That looks good. What is the difference between tobacco smoke and weed smoke? That weed doesn't sort of leave a smell, and afterward, do you know
that weed doesn't
science
leave a
behind
smell?
It? Like you can smoke weed inside, and it doesn't leave the room smelling like a cigarette would afterward.
No, I don't know, because
I know lots of people that smoke weed but don't. That smoke it inside, or
and wouldn't
often
smoke a cigarette.
It will leave a smell, but it won't stain as bad as tobacco smoke does. I mean, I have relatives who have been smoking inside for years, and you know, you walk into their living room and the roof and the walls are stained brown from
every
tobacco.
pub in New Zealand was like that about 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
You know?
So, but yeah, I see what you mean. Maybe cannabis smoke doesn't stain or linger as much.
It's still a natural thing that's burning. It's interesting how the same thing can be so different between two substances, you know?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's the THC or something in it, CBD in it, that's actually...
I think
addicting
we're
the
just
potency.
talking about a plant when we're talking about cannabis rather than a cigar, you know, where we've got tobacco and a bunch of other chemicals being smoked.
Right.
So,
and the difference, obviously, is that the marijuana itself is a bud. It's a flower of the plant rather than a dried leaf.
Yeah, that's true.
So the actual density and the I guess chemical absorbance would be different. Probably different burning points there might have something to do with it.
Yeah.
It's not bad. I like that.
Yeah, it's not a bad cigar at all.
Sipping the cigar.
Cuba, that could be a good topic for debate. Old Cuba, how Cuba works. That's an interesting example of a country that, you know, is communist, but people view the leadership there in completely different ways. Like, you know, Castro was the leader there for 50 years plus. Some people love Castro because under communism, free education, free healthcare, a lot of things that you don't get in a lot of other countries that are capitalist. But then at the same time, you know, you get the same problem of, like, you know, oppressing people. He doesn't like being embargoed by the rest of the world. So all the cars in Cuba, I don't know if it's changed now, but most of the cars in Cuba were from pre-1959 because that was the last time that they got, or pre-70s actually, I think, is when the embargo properly started for cars. But so if you went to Havana 10 years ago, all the cars you'd be seeing from the 1970s, they just haven't had anything new since then.
Right.
You know?
Because there's nothing else coming in.
Yeah, because they don't have any trade deals with any other countries.
Oh, okay. Right. So how does that work? It's just purely just local.
They were getting
products that
support from the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union was still around, and other communist countries, China, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically just get support. And I guess industry, they probably would have been exporting sugar and probably tobacco of some kind, but you couldn't buy cigars. You couldn't buy Cuban cigars, you know what I mean, internationally
And
for a long time.
Oh, internationally.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's why
yeah.
it was seen as a fancy, as a
And
sign of
that's
affluence to have it.
around
'cause
the
you-
80s and 90s, right?
Yeah, even up until
Yeah.
2010, 2011.
It's quite rare to
2012.
get them. Yeah. Have
So
you-
Cuba are known for their fat, high
Big
quality
old-
cigars.
yeah, man.
All kinds of cigars, not even fat ones, thin ones.
I didn't expect that to be what was available where we got this, but I was sort of keen for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not cheap. But I wouldn't know where to start in terms of what I'm actually getting.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I guess they're one of those things that you can't really guess at it, can you? You know what I mean? Like you've kind of got to just try all the cigars until you figure
That's
one
the way
that
I
you.
think, yeah.
Yeah, find a flavor that you like or
But you know,
size. Yeah.
some people froth over them, really froth over them.
Mm.
Michael Jordan, for example,
Yeah, pimp.
is always smoking them.
I was once walking to town with a friend on a night out, and we bought a small cigar, and I watched him inhale about half of the cigar
Ouch.
and collapse.
Really?
Yeah, definitely not designed to be.
What is it that's
inhaled.
different about them compared to a cigarette? Like it's still tobacco, isn't it?
Yeah,
Well,
no
yeah,
filter.
no filter. This is
Right.
the leaf wrapped in itself.
Hmm.
The treating process is a lot different, I think. Like this is, I think, just dipped and dried and then rolled in itself, and yeah, there's not much else to it. Whereas it's probably more chemicals that go into a cigarette to make it a bit smoother, more additives.
I presume you will be voting a certain way in the referendum this year, Luke, in terms of marijuana.
Yeah. I don't really hold a view on recreational cannabis. Like, yeah, I see it as being good and bad, although one point I'd like to make is that there's already a black market for cannabis and users of cannabis in New Zealand, whether or not it is legal or not, and whether or not there are systems in place or not. So in my eyes, a system would be better than no system.
Yeah, for sure.
But
So you think there'll still be trades going down outside of the law
Definitely.
with it still being in?
Definitely.
I think it's a
And-
fact.
And for what reason?
Because there's always going to be people trying to compete against a market, you know, like, you know,
But like tobacco is no one's selling tobacco.
but
like
that's why you're
streets.
seeing, well, that's not true though. You know, you look at places that ram raids happen or robberies at dairies, the reason that a lot of those people will be buying or not rather buying, stealing those quantities of cigarettes would be to sell off those cigarettes.
They have a market value.
Yeah, they have a market value. So, you know, there's the market of people that, in their mind, before they're about to commit this robbery, they're probably like, well, if we get just a bunch of these cigarettes and we hawk them in our neighbourhood or to other people in large amounts like you would.
Yeah, that's true. Like the guy that broke into the
BP last night.
and last night, did you say?
Yeah, did you hear about that last
Whoa,
night?
no.
The one
I heard
opposite the
about
Oval, bro.
Really?
Yeah.
Shit. No, I was talking about the one like last year, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that
The Leith Liquor
There you
Lane. Not the Leith Liquor Lane, the liquor lane on the one-way street system that's next to the McDonald's in North D.
Yeah. Right.
That the reason that they changed the door around, you got to enter in the back, is because they got ram raided in the front.
Yeah.
and so that now they
that's the thing I
changed it
was
so
thinking
that
of,
you
yeah.
can't get in the front door, because obviously the person would have just lined it up and just
Well, bam.
bam straight to the
Yeah,
front doors.
shit.
And they would have probably been going for cigarettes more than alcohol. I'd say they probably just in their mind were like, well, you can get cigarettes and alcohol
value
at the
or
same time.
like numerical value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, the taxing is done on tobacco. I think this year was the last year of it being like the tax being raised on it
Yeah. Well,
because we were supposed to be smoke free by this year, and look at us.
And we're here enjoying a cigar.
Well, I think personally that if you know the vote is yes in the referendum, and we start seeing the legal market get established, I think that the market for tobacco will probably increase too, because there's a lot of people that are don't smoke marijuana straight anyway, they smoke it with tobacco. And I'd say that once businesses start getting enough requests from people being like, they'll talk to their customers and they'll be like, how do you smoke? And they'll say, I smoke chop, or I'm smoking the mix, whatever. They'll probably try to aim to have tobacco products in the store as well. So that will probably put pressure on the government to reduce, taxation on those businesses that are, because those legalized stores are going to pop up that are going to be doing more than just selling you bud. They're going to be selling you gummy bears, going to be selling you food, they're going to be selling you vegan slices infused with CBD oil. They're going to be selling you lots of things.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be an interesting world if it does.
I don't think you'll be surprised, right? Honestly, the one thing that'll change the most that the average Joe Blow would recognise is there's probably going to be more people smoking in public, and that would be the most day-to-day. The argument for people saying, I don't want my kids influenced. That's probably the fairest one. Is that they'll probably be in a park in Botanic Gardens and they'll say, "Hey, mum, what is that smell?"
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it's not illegal, you can be honest with your children.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can say, well, this is a legal thing for adults in this country now. And
probably end up just saying it's a different kind of cigarette,
Yeah, exactly.
And then,
but the thing is, they won't have to be, you won't have to go through those stupid, those not stupid. They're not, well, they are stupid. The way that they're taught is stupid, but, they'll be able to go through the DEAR program and they won't have to kid children into thinking that, some friendly strangers can offer you marijuana and therefore you're going to want to do heroin, etc.
Sure.
They're going to be able to focus on the fact that New Zealand has like a P problem, like a methamphetamine problem. But that will hopefully be one of those things that would be relieved, because in the far north, anywhere in New Zealand, probably a lot of places in New Zealand, but particularly in the far north, you can get P for cheaper than you could get marijuana, and those are people who actually, there's a lot of people out there who actually would be using P because they have pain, they don't have pain control, or they don't have, I don't know, just the circles they run in. It's like that someone would just say, just blaze yourself out of it of thing,
Yeah.
And then they'll just be going to P because it's like far more intense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, and how do you even, because that's not going to be something that's illegal anytime soon, so that's still going to be something that's only priced by
But that's something that the police will be able to put their focus and time into.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the police should never have been prosecuting marijuana in the first place, to be honest. And the amount that the New Zealand police know about the marijuana use in this country and how many people are using it, not even consistently, but have or would use it or whatever, it's pretty imbued in New Zealand culture. Like there's a lot of people that are smoking. So what was the point of a lot of these raids where the police are seizing massive amounts and persecuting some 75-year-old man for growing plants in his backyard, and then they're posting it being like, hey, this was a victory for the legal system. But then they're getting lots of feedback from people being like, no, persecute the real crimes, crank down on the ice problem in this country, the P problem in this country.
Big crime or small crime is still a crime, though. It's still something that they have to have on their radar. And
for sure it is.
They're still having to be aware of and respond to.
Yeah,
for sure it is. But, the marijuana crime market, if you want to call it that, that's not something that, marijuana doesn't erode people's living quarters. Do you know what I mean? Like, a massive problem in tenancy is people coming into homes and they're ruined they have to get them cheap for, they used to be P houses, and the ceilings are ruined, the insulation is ruined, families can't live in them. You might come into somebody's house who's been smoking weed in there a lot and go, oh, I suppose someone who's really smoking weed in here, all we need to do is open the windows for a couple of days, lend it out to a new tenant, and it's sweet. You're not going to have to fumigate houses or protect children from it. You know?
For sure.
So there's more than just the crime fighting aspect of it that's fucked up a lot of people in New Zealand.
You're right. So just more focus onto like, I suppose, less focus on smaller scale marijuana issues and crimes and things, so you can focus on something that's going to do a bit more harm.
Yeah. I guess ultimately the question we're trying to answer here and with the referendum is, how do we want to look at it? Is it a crime to use cannabis, or is it now something we want to create a system out of and say this isn't bad?
And be able to realign the focus from that into mental health rather than into criminal prosecution,
I see no reason to not have it legalised. I mean, I haven't been told of any consequences or read into any real consequences of it coming into legalisation. Have you got any thoughts in regards to that?
If you want to look at examples like America, I think Canada, there have been positive effects of legalizing and creating a system out of.
In a recreational standpoint.
Yeah.
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 It was completely legalized in Canada. They skipped decriminalisation.
Right. And as well as probably some negative effects too, like bringing up the points from earlier, drug problem within New Zealand, probably also worldwide, includes cannabis use, and, making it recreational would definitely give greater access to people who could be problem users. But again, creating a system out of that, and, if we're looking at taxing the consumption of cannabis and then putting some of that money towards rehabilitation for mental health or problem users, still sounds like a better option than what we currently have.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. What do you mean by what did you say? A problem user. What would be an example of that? What did you mean by that term?
Yeah, I guess that's a topic of conversation. What is healthy cannabis use versus unhealthy cannabis use, or medicinal use versus recreational use? Unhealthy use. I mean, you could look at that from a health perspective or a financial perspective, in a lot of different ways. I guess if it's affecting you negatively in your health or your finances or your life, then you could call that a problem user.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
I think all of those things are true for sure. But at the same time, if you set the standard to be from a legalized perspective onwards, that you no longer have to be hushed about it in mental health, in terms of when mental health is discussed, or in how systems in mental health facilities can be reshuffled to be prepared for that. You know what I mean? Like, there's probably a lot of people even now who are suffering from schizophrenic disorders or any kind of mental health issue that are exacerbating it by marijuana use, but wouldn't come forward and say that due to the stigma around it being illegal, or the staff who were receiving that person couldn't take or learn, someone who's enthused about medicine and has a knowledge on marijuana couldn't go into a facility nowadays that they work in as a staff member or as a doctor and say, this is what I know about marijuana use, this is this, because it's not acceptable to come forward to discuss that, because it's in a realm of illegality. It's in a place where you couldn't accept the opinion of a doctor legally who is saying, this is... Do you know what I mean? Like, that grey area gets taken away because there's no longer the looking over your shoulder being like, maybe I shouldn't tell this person about this drug that is illegal.
And at least for someone like that is using it, or using a certain amount of it, or knows that they need a particular amount, at least with the legalization, would know what they're getting and know where it's coming from, rather, and how much they could be taking. So at least they could sort of actually look at how much they're getting at a time to treat whatever thing it is that they're using it for. Yeah.
Plus, the other side of it would be if somebody had a dependence on it for whatever, like a psychological dependence, because obviously we know that it's not a chemically dependent drug. It's not something that your body will react to in a physical sense. You're not going to be physically harmed from withdrawing from it.
It's not chemically addictive.
Yes,
we could say.
Yeah. So at the same time, if there was changes in the product itself, e.g., non-psychoactive CBD oils, where the person was still getting the positive impacts from their marijuana use. Say somebody who was I know this is a hypothetical and obviously we'd be quite specific, but somebody was suffering from seizures or bulimia or something like that, where they wanted to treat it medically, and they were also a marijuana smoker, and they're saying, hey, well, I smoke weed because it makes me want to eat, or
it gives me an appetite.
Yeah, it's stopping me from having seizures. It just happens to also have this side effect. Also happens to have this side effect where I'm having mental drawbacks. Yeah. They could take a product that wasn't going to give them those mental drawbacks because something had been developed.
Yeah, if you want to look at science and if you allow it to become part of science rather than part of illegality or whatever, science can do some pretty cool things, separate the THC, the CBD. It can extract certain parts of the plant. It can, create it into different... It can make it available to the body in different ways. Which is
So I have a loose idea or at least knowledge of the two, but the difference between the THC and the CBD is mainly to do with the recreation and medical side of things. Is that right?
No.
No.
Yeah.
No, sorry, so you can...
In terms of science and the chemicals, your THC would be your psychoactive component.
Right.
And your CBD would be your non-psychoactive component. And I believe that is the part which has most of the medical benefit.
Okay, so
a
say
difference
if you were to treat say a Parkinson's patient with THC, could it still work?
Not THC.
Yeah, sorry, my point. Could you treat them with THC with it being a psychoactive, so they just have a psychoactive effect, but still do the same thing that CBD oil would do? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you could give them a plant which has both THC and CBD and treat the Parkinson's, although...
So they don't have the same properties in terms of a medicinal thing, like THC wouldn't do the same thing that CBD would do with the
No, it wouldn't,
involved.
but it's kind of both part of the one flower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
THC isn't separate from CBD, so THC and CBD aren't separate entities of the same medicine. THC is present in marijuana. That's what gives it the psychoactive compound. So CBD is
another chemical also present.
Yes, another chemical also present.
So you're getting both at any one time?
No. You
With
don't have
the flower. You usually would.
So you can have THCBD and you can have CBD. So THCBD would be a psychoactive component of the CBD oil. So you could say that would be recreationally if you were to not want to smoke, but you wanted to get traditionally high, where you're going to be having psychoactive thought patterns. You'd go for a THCBD. Whereas a CBD oil wouldn't necessarily have to be psychoactive.
Okay.
Do you get different? So you could have one THCBD oil, psychoactive for recreation use, and a CBD oil, non-psychoactive
so you can have CBD
medical.
without THC.
Yep.
But you can't have THC without CBD.
You could
Yes.
you could extract basically THC as well, although probably a bit less common because people
What's
are
the
more
point?
looking to escape the psychoactive
Yeah,
side of the plant
yeah.
rather than isolate it.
that's sort of what I was asking. Like if they are sort of both intertwined, could you like what would be in a case aside from recreational? Like, is there a medical situation where you would use THC?
No,
CBD?
probably not.
No, just because it has a psychoactive property.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at psychotherapy,
When we talk in psychotherapy, are we talking sort of like hallucinogenic? Like, what is it about CBD what is it doing to someone in a medical
So the CBD
situation?
oil, so like say CBD oil or CBD spray, like that video we watched with the guy that had Parkinson's in the States, that will be acting on his cannabinoid receptors inside of his body. So those will be being activated and providing a therapeutic through his nervous system or through his muscle system to provide that relief. Whereas a THCBD oil will also do that, but it will provide you with the psychoactive effect that's changing your thought process or providing you with perspective that you wouldn't normally have if you were sober, say.
Yeah.
So like a little kid with seizures or autism, they wouldn't give them THCBD oil because you're not trying to activate their thought pattern, you're trying to treat it from
okay.
like a physical perspective.
exactly, and giving THC to a young child,
They wouldn't
could have some
pretty
very
good
harmful
they
effects.
wouldn't do that clinically, medically.
No.
They wouldn't. I don't know if products really even exist that are designed in the medical field to have THC psychoactive components to them, because that's not what that's not what marijuana as a medicine is designed for. That just happens to be one of the side effects as a recreational drug.
Yeah, to tie this all back to COVID-19, there was a strain of cannabis designed for a young girl with I can't remember the disease called Charlotte's Web, which was just CBD, it was non-psychoactive, used to treat this young girl, and she actually caught COVID-19 and passed away from the virus.
Oh, wow.
Which is really sad. But,
So they couldn't get the results from her, or that was what they gave her played a part in what helped?
She was ill prior to COVID-19. I don't want to say Parkinson's because I don't know, but they invented a strain of cannabis without THC, or with very low amounts anyway, and very high in CBD, specifically for her, which treated her initial illness. But just reading an article the other day, she caught the COVID-19 virus, and
so that just swooped in and just
took her.
Finished it. Yeah, it didn't have anything to do with what she
nothing
was
to
taking,
do with
CBD was.
her prior illness,
okay.
but COVID-19 took her out.
Yeah, man.
But that's the thing with a lot of the whole preventative measures for the health system with the whole lockdown and staying away from other people was because of things like that. If you had a previous condition or whatever, regardless from the marijuana topic we're talking about, but like AIDS. Let's talk about AIDS. It's like when these kind of pandemic effects come about, it's people like that they want to protect, because AIDS is a disease that targets your immune system. So it's something that you can it's something you can survive with. You could live with AIDS, but you have to be constantly vigilant of the fact that, like, getting pneumonia or getting a disease like coronavirus, which is an airborne flu, is something that will make you even more susceptible, and your weakened immune system wouldn't handle it. So, like, that girl, they would have been on the watch and be like, "There's this friggin' pandemic coming for us. This girl's already at a high risk because she
has a compromised immune system."
Exactly.
Is that airborne?
Coronavirus.
Droplet spread, right?
Yeah,
which
yeah.
means...
Do you call that airborne though?
Yeah. Well, technically, I think it's not airborne in terms of like that it hangs around in a shroud, but it's airborne in terms of it is transmitted from person to person from like a proximity perspective. Like you don't have to be. I don't have to be right in your face, spitting in your face for you to catch COVID. It could be.
You could touch the same surface or something like that. I think it lives on a surface for 72 hours.
Yeah.
And that varies, I think, from surface to surface.
Different materials,
Or at least what I've seen. But I don't know what's right at this point.
I thought about something we could talk about as well, by the way. So if everyone deviated.
Go ahead.
Continue.
Have you seen the videos of Kanye West?
Oh, yes.
I haven't watched the whole video, but I have seen a little snippet of it. But I haven't been following it that closely, but I've sort of got a grasp on what's happening.
Yeah.
Talking about his birth and crying to a group of people.
His adoption.
I like Kanye, I like Kanye's music. I can appreciate Kanye. When I see a video of Kanye crying about his dad not wanting to have... I get sad. Yeah. It's like,
I think. Well, I'm not a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist by any means, but to me, that video was like textbook bipolar disorder in a video. In terms of the hypeness that he had coming into it, where he's just rambling on like a high, and then just this crashing low where he's just being super emotional, incoherently emotional.
Yeah.
And it's like. He went on a Twitter, on like a tweeting spree afterwards. I saw it was like 20 tweets being
As
like,
he does.
Kim tried to get me committed to this doctor and yada yada, paranoia, like all these things, That's when America and the public has if people are deciding that they're serious about mental illness as a cause and mental health,
Look at that right there.
take the guy out of that platform right now. Right, and you're not invalidating what he has to say or whatever, but that's the point where the guy's fame, his image, or whatever, his music, take that completely away from him.
Right, yep.
And at his core, he's a human being having a mental breakdown, and he needs to be seen that way and treated and helped that way. And this is the kind of thing we talked about. I think on one of the first podcasts we had. It's like the Elvis thing. You're the king, and nobody stops and says. The king is actually just a human being that's struggling with the same things we're all struggling with, but we're enabling him right now. Someone needs to stop enabling him, or this is how he's going to die.
Yeah.
This is how people die in these scenarios. Is that they're left in these states where their perspective changes. They take their own life, or they just take copious amounts of prescription medications, whatever.
Yeah.
Because they're not taken away from their status as an influencer. this whole thing about him running for presidency in the first place, if you look at it from that perspective of that video, it's part of an unhingedness from bipolar disorder. You know, it's just this. It's
and it's not getting looked at like that from what I've seen, and people are sort of taking.
People are making fun of it.
Yeah, of course.
Or like being like,
Kanye.
Kanye's a prick. Ha, look at this fucking idiot getting what he deserves. It's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you thought of the guy.
Yeah.
You watch that video, regardless of who he was. If you saw anybody else, you'd be like, man, that person needs some help, some professional help.
He does.
And he's probably not going to get it being where he is, you know? Which is sad.
I think it's all pretty fast and loose, jumping on the presidential, side of things, I suppose. He's doing it a bit sooner than I thought he was going to be doing it.
But I think that has to do with his ego and his willingness to recognize that he has the platform, and he just utilized the platform to demonstrate his mental illness. Do you know what I mean? Like that wasn't a coherent political rally by any means. That wasn't a
What was the initial?
It was
speech?
a rally. It was a rally, like a Trump style rally.
yeah.
Well, not a presidential one in terms of that was his platform for his case for president or whatever. But I think people went there to be like, this is the starting point of a presidential rally. When somebody gets told, you should run for president, or you should, previously when prospective people who have never been politicians enter a race, especially in the States, they'll have rallies due to their popularity. Arnold Schwarzenegger, before he became the governor of California, somebody tells him, oh man, you should run for politics. Like, I'm actually quite interested. And then you start from scratch. And it's like a musician. You start being in clubs and then you go to arenas, yada, yada. He was just on that first step, basically. He just gets a leg up on everyone else because he's Kanye West.
Yeah, right.
But that video made me straight up sad. That video made me be like, this isn't funny. This isn't like, I don't have in either way opinion on Kanye West. I like some of his music. I think some of the stuff he said is pretty damaging and ridiculously stupid. But at the same time, I don't take my information from Kanye West because I'm not an idiot. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's hard. You can't stop the guy from speaking, but it's definitely a scenario where he should be seen to.
He's an artist, right? Like he's communicated his whole life, like through his music and everything. He is communicating mental illness.
Yeah,
You're exactly right.
Yeah,
and
the fact that you feel that way about Kanye West in terms of what you shouldn't listen to from him is an indication before any event like this would happen that he is someone to keep a close eye on in terms of what he's going to do. Yeah.
And when you're talking about presidential campaigns and, politics, him running for president would make him someone a lot of people would listen to. And, raising the question, is he mentally fit to be a president? Probably not.
Not at all.
No.
He's not politically fit to be a president.
Definitely
not.
And Donald Trump's not mentally or politically fit to be a president.
Yeah.
But it's the case of the golden goose. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to stop the gravy train.
That's
like,
the society we live in, is Trump as president right now. So Kanye running for president
would be absolutely obscene 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Now is obscene, but to a degree where people are like, oh,
yeah.
well.
I think because it's sort of been a running, not a joke per se, but a running theme that powerful celebrities, A-list celebrities should be in politics or should be running for president, and sort of made up campaigns get sort of spread online, and you sort of get this sort of funny idea, what if The Rock was the president sort of thing. And then it's when it sort of becomes a reality, it doesn't really click for people. It sort of seems like, oh, he's actually doing it. Oh, look at Kanye, he's up doing this, not actually saying, hang on, should this actually be happening? Like, have we just taken this too far? Have we let this issue sort of come up on its own, and it's not?
I think we passed that line when Trump became president.
That's sort of partly my point, but that sort of stemmed from there. It's like, oh my God, this guy's actually gotten into this position. What's to stop anyone like a Kanye West or whoever to get into that position as well?
Well, it's happening all over the world though. Pakistan just elected Imran Khan, who was a cricketer, a famous Pakistani cricketer, like their Richie McCaw basically, as their president, and he. Like, you should see pictures of his house, bro. He lives in like a lair, like a lair for women. Women love him. He's like a playboy. He's got like the hyper masculinity, like, says things are on his mind, thing that Trump was going for in Bolsonaro and Brazil and stuff, bro. And it's just happening everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's because the average Joe doesn't want to be invested in politics with someone they view as a lifelong politician telling them what to do.
Yeah.
It's more perceptible for them to listen to some hero of theirs, to hear some things that are incorrect. They can be incorrect, but you hear them from Imran Khan. You grew up in the back streets of Karachi. You're like, oh, this is who I want to be. That guy runs for president. Like, this is the only guy I recognise.
Yeah.
This is the only dude I'm going to vote for, because why would I vote for anybody else?
Yeah, and it makes sense, but when you see a celebrity, you feel like you already know who they are. It's not just another random politician popping up. You're going, oh, I know that guy. He's pretty good. He's been on Dell. He seems like a good bloke, so he gets votes.
Yeah,
there's obviously no. Sorry, go ahead.
And you look at Donald Trump, for example. I feel like he used his celebrity status to help him become president.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 100%.
The Apprentice.
And his money to be able to run a campaign.
The White House is just a big episode of The Apprentice, bro.
Yeah.
All the people he hires and fires, and like the way that he doesn't really answer or respond to anybody that he doesn't want to, or he just talks shit to anybody. That's because that's what it's like in The Apprentice. Like there's,
it's dramatic.
The amount of things I've read about The Apprentice is ridiculous. Like he would show up late. He couldn't be bothered reading the cue. He couldn't read the cue cards. Like all the staff are like, this guy's definitely got dyslexia. He can't read the lines. They're putting the screen, because you know how in a lot of the scenes from that show, he'd be in a boardroom and they'd be in opposite some other people, and then the contestant or the person in the episode would be facing him. There'd be a big teleprompter behind that person, clear as day, with massive words, and they'd go take after take after take after take, and he would just fudge it all, and he sometimes he couldn't be bothered. Like they couldn't get him to stand up because he's like, no, I just don't want to stand. Like he's like just a big petulant child, just a big child.
I've never seen that show. I don't know.
Oh, it ran for ages, bro.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, roughly what it was, but never actually seen
Arnold
it.
Schwarzenegger took over for him after he became president.
Was he governor at the time?
No. They're just like, we need to replace the host of The Apprentice. Who should we get? And they're like, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think ran for 1 season or 2 seasons. It just wasn't the same, and then it just ended.
So what was the premise of that show, The Apprentice?
The Apprentice.
Was it actually something becoming Trump's apprentice?
Yeah, these people got put into teams, and basically they were given tasks, like these fake business kind of prospects, whatever. They were given a thing like, how would you make this money, or how would this? They give them an event and they go out and do it or whatever, and based on that, Trump would grill them in a boardroom setting and be like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? And they'd be like, or they'd be ditzy or stupid or whatever, and he'd be like, you're fired. Like if they didn't make it on the next round, they'd be like, you're fired, and they would leave, and then the person would just leave the room, and then they'd be out of the team, and it was like a seasonal thing. It was like Survivor basically, but in a boardroom thing, and whoever won the seasons, that season of The Apprentice, just like 16 seasons or something, they would get a role in the Trump organization, somewhere low, whatever, I don't know. It sounded like a big fuck around, and they,
Yeah.
But anyway.
And he's now the president. Yeah, it's crazy.
That sort of reality television.
China.
China.
Yeah.
Let's have a quick breather, eh?
All right. Which breather?
All my breathing.
China.
What was it like being back at a gig last Friday? Was it last Friday or Saturday for
the Mod Orange one?
Yeah. Oh no. Or was that the same as the 3/4 marathon gig?
No.
That was different again.
Yep.
Okay. Well, either of those. I mean, being able to do that again.
Pretty much, almost like lockdown never happened.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. Like you said before, we haven't been in it for that long. So
I still did feel quite uncomfortable during the Mild Orange segment of their gig, just because of how the crowd demographic, and also the fact that it was like, it was quite breathery and really, packed, and just but this one was particularly packed and just like,
where was it?
At Starters Bar.
Yeah,
but the 3/4 marathon gig was at Dive.
Yeah,
but
I've Dive.
Yes, well, Dive is literally exactly the same.
Yeah,
it just has different coloured curtains and a name change.
Yeah, I mean, you go to quite a few gigs around Dunedin, Liam, don't you?
Bit of a gig meister.
Yeah.
Jägermeister. What can you tell us about the music scene in Dunedin? Or
I reckon it's shifting to be more like, I reckon this is probably, to my mind, to my ears anyway, this is probably, I feel like it went through this pendulum effect where you're getting lots of surf rock and touch indie bands kind of thing all at once, you know, like the Soaked Oats, Mod Orange kind of thing going on. But I feel like a lot of those have either moved on or the scene's just kind of changed a little bit. So I feel like the noise / post-punk / alt-rock scene seems to be still quite strong here, because I feel like those ones don't get that big push from YouTube or Spotify or, you know, Indie Shuffle or whatever they kind of get blown up on. Like Mod Orange, some of their videos have 15, 20 million views on YouTube kind of thing.
wow.
So the scene's still quite strong with those, you know, kind of alt-X, which I like, which I prefer.
I think that's always going to stick around in Dunedin. There's always that crowd that's here to do that. I think the surf rock thing has been played out a wee bit, but I think that's my bias playing, and I don't know how.
No, I think you'd be surprised. Like even the Mod Orange gig, to be fair, I didn't really go for Mod Orange. Obviously, I went to support Juno's and you know, James Murphy's music and a bit of White Capone and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, they're not really my thing. And they're not really a lot of people's thing there, I found. I mean, obviously, there was a lot of people that were there that were fans of them, for sure.
Yeah, I think the thing with that music, though, whether you like it or not, it's a good atmosphere to be a part of. Like, it's good music that everyone's pretty much going to get along to in some
not
way
offensive.
or form. Yeah, exactly. It's fairly easy listening
And
stuff.
where
It's
it
well
is,
crafted music, for sure.
I mean, this is a Rio Week event at the Otago University. So, you know, to a student demographic who come down here to study and get a feel for the culture. So, I guess
just something to be able to do as part of the Dunedin. But to that point, being part of O Week, I think a lot of the people that will show up to a gig like that aren't necessarily there because of the band that's playing, even though they'd be well renowned. It's just like, it's O Week, there's something on for me to go to.
Yeah,
tonight.
for sure.
Yeah.
And we can't say that we weren't guilty of that when we were younger too. I'm
not criticising.
No, I know. I just that's the natural course of things, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And you need those people as musicians. You actually do those. That's part and parcel of the playing in those larger styles. You know, Sarsbar isn't a particularly large venue by any means, but
if you just had alt rock bands playing at every venue all the time, it would be
and just, you know, I guess being in a band setting or being in that kind of musical setting, you just have to. That's a part and parcel of it. Is that not everybody is going to be an aficionado of your music or appreciate it from a musical standpoint. Some people are just going to be there to fucking get wasted and groove, and that's fine.
Yeah, and that's inevitable.
Music's interpretable however you want it to be interpreted. You know, you lose control of that once you start playing to bigger audiences anyway, because you know, you don't get to, unless you put your hand up, unless you know, while you're tuning on your instruments, you go, hey, so who came here because they knew us? Who came here because, you know what I mean? Like, unless you actually split it up and try to do some market research or something, you're never going to really know what your fans. You don't really know. That's the only thing that live performances are really. You know, the biggest thing that comes out of them is probably you get to see who your fan base is. You get to look and be like, okay, these are the people that are listening to the music. You know, this is the person that's, you know, that I can see on stage, because you can't see shit on stage half the time. You can see maybe the first 4 or 5 rows, and you know, people scattered here and there. But like that gives you kind of, I don't know, at least some sort of viewpoint as to who your demographic is. And next time you're making music, whatever, you can think, oh, this is what that person looked like, or this is what this person, you know,
for sure,
resonated with, or
and part of just what happens in those gigs sometimes is that people, because there are so many people that do just happen to be there, will sort of realize, oh, maybe I do like this band, and sort of look into who it actually is. But you usually have that sort of plastered everywhere when you're turning up to these big gigs anyway. Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's always going to be a desire for live music and stuff in Dunedin, because this is the kind of place it is, and it's just a progressive place in terms of musical styles and places you can perform and whatever. It's just actually the gigs being affordable, people being able to go to them, timing with exams and events and whatnot, and also just DCC regulations and the weather and things like that. They all play a massive part of it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Do you find yourself going out much, Luke?
I mean, more recently, so I've found a space, to go out to a music gig or go out for a drink or something like that. So there's definitely a place for me to want to go out to listen to music.
Do you enjoy the kind of music that's being presented at these places you're going? Or are you sort of find that you sort of are just there and it's part of the vibe, you're not necessarily going there to support someone or really be into it?
I can appreciate music, but I don't hold a very technical knowledge of music or
Sure,
a
and nor
deep
do I.
understanding.
Yeah.
So
I think in its nutshell, you just know whether you like something or not, regardless of whether it's good or not.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna like it. You're not gonna like it one way or another. You know?
exactly, and there are genres of music where I like more and I like less, but I can appreciate all music for music.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Is there something you'd like to see more of? Is there something that you think is missing, or something that's in your sort of ideal?
I would really
ideology?
like to get a feel for Dunedin's culture through the music that I hear in Dunedin, and
Yeah.
I think I do. Like Liam says, kind of surfy rock kind of bands seem to be
Seems to be the
a
go.
theme
Yeah.
coming out of Dunedin or with the music. But again, I don't hold a very deep understanding of it, but I do appreciate it, and there is some good talent that comes out of Dunedin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the better underground places. I think you see lots of up and coming people coming up through here. But again, I'm about the same as you, man. I don't have an in-depth knowledge of the scene here. It is for me just a matter of knowing who I like and knowing what's going to be good before I'm going to it.
Yeah.
And it's usually just people I know that I'm going to support. But that being said, I haven't been to a gig in a long, long time. I've found recently that I just personally find them claustrophobic. It's not a matter of wanting to be there or not. It's just like that sort of environment sometimes is a wee bit, it gets hot. Being in a crowd of people for me just personally gets a bit much. I don't know how you guys handle that sort of thing. Like whether I really like the music or not, having to stand there like in a crowd of people sort of bumping up and down just gets real old real quick for me, and that's why I find myself sort of staying at home a lot of the time. But
it's a vibe.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't. I guess I like music so much I don't actually think about who's there at all. I don't really want to say hello to people who are there, whatever. If I don't like it, I'll leave. I'm not the one person who's just going there to just be seen or whatever. Sometimes I am, won't lie, because it's a good way to meet other people who are interested in it.
A social event,
and you also I've spoken to people at other gigs heavily to playing in other gigs myself, etc., etc.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Being a musician yourself, I guess going to gigs is a way to network.
Yeah.
And find yourself, doing a gig yourself.
But at the same time, it's funny because you meet like two kinds of people, I feel like. People who you have like a connection with because you like them as people and they also just happen to be musicians, or people that are musicians and might know that I'm a musician or won't know, either or, and will just kind of perceive it as, I don't know, trying to be around them for the cloud or whatever, but even if you're trying to do it in the most low-key way possible, you know what I mean?
That's the worst kind of interaction, trying to tell someone else who is, and I was going to say better than you, but not like someone that is doing better, I suppose. And in terms of if you're talking to someone that's in a band that is quite successful, and you say, "Oh, I'm a musician as well," you feel sort of degraded, and they're not going to be like, "Oh, sick, that's really cool." There's sort of a weird stature in place where. Is that the point you're trying to say? Yeah. Not that you shouldn't be networking like that, but that's sort of almost a degrading feeling to doing that.
Yeah.
At least I've felt that talking to.
It's also funny because, like, sometimes you'll find yourself purposely talking about things that aren't music to demonstrate that you're not going into the conversations just to trap them into the corner, kind of thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
And some people that's fine because it's organic. You might know them. You might know what their interests are. You can talk to them about other things. And then other people, it's like, you know them well enough to chat to them that they recognise you and they'll stop and talk to you. But at the same time, it's like, or you'll say something like, you try to give an alternative, like I might say to someone, are you getting a bit sick of tour? I see this to somebody we know. I was like, like at the 3/4 marathon gig, he was working at the door. I was talking to him. I was like, quite a successful New Zealand artist at the moment.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, how's it all going for you, man? Keeping it fresh? Like, it's not getting too boring for you. Basically, it was just like, it's not getting too boring. Like, you're not just seeing it as like a chore. And I didn't mean it from like you're naturally going to be jaded by this. Like, I wasn't trying to get out of him like, you must hate this now, like to try to put him on my level or anything like that. But I felt like it got perceived that way. Whereas I was just trying to be like, I didn't want to be the dude that's like, touring's the dream, doing this and this is the dream, when I know that it's not. Like, it's give and take. Sometimes things are awesome. You get perspective that a lot of other people don't. But at the same time, there's a lot of shittiness. Like, you have to keep up relationships with people all the time, and just all that crap.
Yeah, I like the idea of being like keeping to myself creatively. I don't like talking about myself to people in that sort of capacity, whether I want to or not, or should or not. Marketing yourself is never something that is easy or you feel like is right unless you're really super ego driven.
Yeah. Well, that's what's annoying. Is like some people might know you from the fact that you perform live or might be able to sing in front of people or whatever. They just assume that you naturally always want to be a front person. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like lots of people, like I'll jam with some people and they're like, oh, you tell us about this or like lead the way kind of thing. It's like, well, the way that I play with people is that, just because I sing doesn't mean I know everything about music. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess there's a natural inclination in people to be like, oh, if somebody's singing, they're the person that's stepping in the front, therefore they have the knowledge about this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't defer that way. Even with myself, I'm not like, when I get on stage, I'm not some kind of lead singer, format, whatever. Because then when you get off stage and you're different, people will be like, oh, the fuck, like, he's a two-faced person or he's two-sided or whatever. Like, to me, you're just a person that managed to go on stage and change your voice to sound like something else for a bit, and then you come off stage and you should just be the same. Like you don't have to be
for sure
different.
Yeah. And I think there's a big part of that ties into being of a certain genre, like trying to play something a certain way that's
looking the
not
right
really
way.
authentic. It's just something that's trendy and it comes off sort of tacky and that's the worst kind of thing. We hear someone play something live or you know what their music's about and you've just seen them come off stage and you talk to them and it's like, was that even the same guy that was up there or girl, whoever that was up there doing that?
Well, it's like we were talking about in the last chat we had. It's like where, it's like that weird battle where it should be okay to not be satisfied with what happened when you come off stage, even if it was fine, even if it was 100% okay. It's like a natural inclination for a lot of people to just be like, well, that was crap, or I do that better next time, or whatever. Yeah. Whereas, and then if you have somebody come into your space and try to, praise you or whatever, even if they're doing completely sincerely, that puts you on the wrong foot to interact with them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than someone coming up to you and doubting or like being anti your doubt. Like if you've come off it and said that, oh, that was terrible, I could have done better, and someone says, no, it was great. And it's like, well, I know it wasn't.
Yeah.
You're just saying that to make me feel better when in actual fact, it would be better if you said, "Oh, it wasn't your best shot."
Yeah.
Like, but
or
of course, no one's ever going to say that to someone.
But just accept that it's part of the process. You know what I mean? Like, just accept that somebody
if you're not happy with it, you're not happy with it.
Yeah, or somebody not taking your compliment full gung ho, being, "Oh, I'm the king of the world."
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they were angry at you for giving them the compliment. It doesn't mean that they, some people just can't take compliments, or some people are just, especially when you come off stage. No, it's like you come off stage, you still for like 2-3 hours, you still feel like you're on stage.
Yeah.
So if somebody's like talking to you afterwards and be like, "Oh, it's hard. You're still in that heightened sense mode where you got like this weird adrenaline rush and you almost feel down like a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I find you come off and you're like, it was weird because I feel like your body builds up to such a point and then it happens in a flash and then it ends and then you're like, you're almost in a state of amnesia. Like, did I actually, am I ready to go up again? Like, am I about to play again? Like your mind's almost in that same mindset.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's like I was talking to, well, I'll say his name as well because he got the same name as me, Liam, when he was playing for the Juniors gig. I was like, I said to him before, I was like, you'll be super nervous and just enjoy it because it'll go like a flat. It'll literally go, you can play for 45 minutes to an hour and it feels like you're up there for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Came off and said, that was, I had a few things here and there. And it's like, yeah. But he's like, just almost feel ready to play again, like it's just.
That's interesting. I've never
cool.
been in that situation. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just talking about being critical, I think it's natural for someone who's really good at something or passionate about something to be really critical as a mechanism of driving yourself forward and to do better. And it's only natural for other people who aren't so passionate or are just there to enjoy to have compliments or to really praise that. And I think taking that compliment on board will help. It'll help drive you as well, but being critical without being too critical is
I think it's going to be must have to be quite tricky for some people that perhaps aren't that good, whether they aren't that talented or they don't perform as well as them. They could actually be like their music has the potential to be performed better, and have people saying, "Oh, like it's too awkward." Like if you've gone to a gig and it was actually quite bad or awkward,
right.
You're not going to say that to that person. So if they're coming off the stage, exactly. Not a lot of people have the guts to really say to someone, hey, maybe you could be doing this better or doing that better. If everyone's just going, oh, that was great, and you sort of come off stage and getting this welcome, then you think, well, what should I change about anything? And that's pretty detrimental as well.
Yeah, so being someone who's really passionate about something, having peers around you who can give you constructive criticism can be really helpful in
I think
propelling yourself forward.
Well, yeah, it's true. I think, like, you know, some people don't like to admit this, but, you know, a lot of musicians are propelled by other musicians being better than them. Like, you know, you don't compare yourself. Obviously, what you're doing is individual. You don't have to compare yourself to every other musician or whatever. But I think it's naturally part of a creative person's motive or whatever, just psyche. Even if you're not, you know, embodying it all the time, be like, I need to be better than this person or this person. There's always people that you think of that, like you say, when you're watching those tutorial videos, like, I could do this better than that.
Yeah.
Like, I could do this, this and this and this. Like, that's the mindset that runs through you all the time. So it's quite hard. The people whose like feedback you probably want the most from a technical viewpoint are other musicians, and those are the people who are going to be less likely to give you that feedback because they don't want to be perceived in a negative fashion, even though that they would probably want to tell you something to your face. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
If someone is like, you know, how was the mix up there? Like, what's the mix against, you know, the rhythm section against the vocals? You know, how did it come out? And someone asks you honestly, you should try to answer them honestly because that's what they want. But a lot of musicians will be like, oh, well, I don't want to seem like the know-it-all, or I don't want to seem like the guy who's trying to make them sound like they were worse than they were, so that I look like I'm better. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of mental politics that go into it. But
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's hard to. It's easy to. I lost my train of thought again.
Sorry.
I was going to say sometimes the worst. Sometimes the best thing that someone can say to you is that was bad, and what's going to determine whether you do well or not is how you actually handle that information. Like if you just go, oh, okay, well, and sit and sulk and decide that that's not going to be something that you're going to do anymore, or like, why am I doing this? I think I suck. As opposed to someone that's going to take that information and go, oh, okay, well, what was bad about it? Why did he think it was bad? What can I actually do to get better? I love doing this. I want to be perceived better. So that's sometimes could be super beneficial. But again, if it's going to be someone that's perhaps a bit socially awkward or whatever, you're not really going to give that information clear cut to them in that manner because it could just go south.
Yeah. That's really true. Yeah. Thinking about that from like my job perspective, you know, listening to someone who knows what they're doing about the job is literally a step-by-step process of how to do what I've done wrong right, you know. So that negative or critical feedback is the best information I can receive at that time. To say I would be doing a good job in that moment would be
exactly.
silly.
Yeah, for sure. It's never, there's never the right thing to say to any one person either. I mean, but I just think it's good to have criticism. Like, and if I can relate it to myself, I don't think I've had anyone say to me that they didn't like a painting that I had done or a piece of work that I had done. And I almost want that. I want someone to come in and say, oh, wow, that's not my taste, or I don't like that. Like, I've had people say they don't like my work, but for someone to straight up say to me, I don't like that, I haven't had that yet, and I want that because I know that not everyone likes it, and you can't expect everyone to like things that you make.
It's fair enough, right, for someone to dislike something. Anyone is free to like or dislike anything. That's, I guess, part of the reason why we're here is to choose. What I think I could do would be challenge someone's creative thought process, you know. How do you come up with a piece of artwork? Design process often talks about iterations and kind of putting ideas down and developing them through iterations. And I understand.
What do you mean by it? Are you talking about a design process where you come up with a concept and you develop on that concept and you sort of, is that what?
Yeah, I can relate this to first year architecture. Like we had to design cubes and do something to these cubes through iterations. So one example would be to, you know, put acid on this cube and have 5 different drawings of this cube slowly dissolving, and you see the design process or the process that goes on. I think with artwork, it's really cool to show how you have done something, or
Yeah, for sure.
I like to be able to break down a piece of artwork and see how it's been constructed. That,
Yeah, absolutely.
gives me
And
satisfaction.
one of the artists that I started watching before I started painting properly did exactly that. The part of the reason that I got so engaged in his work was that the fact that he was posting videos of himself doing the work.
Like a time lapse kind of.
Yeah, and sometimes not even, because it took him so little time to actually finish the work that it could just be a little 5-minute video, because it would just be that quick. And that's what appealed to me about it, is that it was actually done so quickly and rapidly and so expressively that it caught my interest.
Really creative,
and that's
yeah.
what I've been trying to do recently, is actually do some process videos of my own to actually show people that are interested in how it's actually done. I think there's a more intimate part of the work when you actually sort of see it from a blank canvas,
Yeah.
and that can translate to anything, like watching people make beats and things as well, like popular producers that doing those beat breakdowns and things. That's so interesting to watch that, and then you can start implementing that your own. It's like sharing the knowledge almost. Like it's kind of, I guess, a cool image to be an artist or a creative that has no, is completely behind closed doors. Like, you just see the final product and you sort of have this perceived idea of what that person's like. Whereas actually, when you sort of let it out, you almost help yourself, because people are then seeing, it's almost a teaching point as well, because you can see your process and how it works, and people can implement that into their own.
It's challenge, isn't it? It's the challenge of everything. Like, there's a good quote. It's like, there was I can't remember what documentary it was. It was a musician that stepped into this big band, and was basically like, they were famous for arguing all the time, disagreeing things, and he's like, to me this is normal, because every band I've ever been in is on the verge of breaking up all the time, because of that challenge aspect, where the thing that propels you is challenging each other and challenging the concept and challenging the form, rather than just, nothing really gets made by just agreeing with everything.
Being a yes man.
Well, it doesn't tend to let ideas catalyze or develop, because if you stop it at its most simplest form and just push it through with a bunch of yeses at the first step of the design phase in anything, in the first piece of art or the first song or the first album, whatever, the first piece of design, architectural design, whatever, you're just pushing through inferiority, rather than actually, letting the cream rise to the top through process of elimination or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Another quote would be kind of, if you look at just the end product, the destination, is it about the destination, or is it about the journey and how you got there?
Yeah, exactly.
The design process.
It makes it so much more interesting for the viewer or the person that's interested, because you do get a more intimate look into what's happening and how it all goes down, because you also sort of get a perception of how that person feels about the work as well. Like, if you were actually looking at the person doing something, you get an idea for how they're actually performing the task, how they're actually engaging with it. Like, it would be pretty boring to watch someone make a beat, or if they were playing something on piano and they were just sort of sitting there, keys in, but if someone's really rocking into it and you can tell that they're enjoying it,
the passion.
Know that there's more passion
and
behind
it doesn't
the work.
matter what it is, whether it be music or artwork or anything, any type of activity. Passion is infectious. Seeing someone who's passionate about what they're doing is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that I think is another part of what will drive a creative field as well. If you're able to share your knowledge on it, that you're going to have more people that are interested in it, and you sort of keep that thing going. Not that art and music and everything is ever going to stop, but you get more people involved because there's more accessibility, especially these days. Like, the amount of information you can get on how to do something that you want to do is endless, basically. You can figure out ways in which to do whatever.
Yeah. But DIY is the thing in the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bedroom pop, bedroom rock.
Which also begs the question, can anyone do it? Like, these days, is it almost too much information for too many people? Like, I wonder what it would look like if you looked at the scale of artists, say, now that we can see, like, on Spotify, how many artists there actually are, like, in terms of music. as opposed to like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, like the actual scale of people that are doing music, because things are so much more accessible nowadays, and you can learn these things in 5-10 minutes.
I think it's the scale of accessibility though, because, back in the day, there was a lot of musicians. There was probably the same amount of musicians, and from like a ratio perspective, it was just that the level of access to those first steps in the rung were smaller. Like, you'd pay, if you wanted to create a demo or cassette tapes or whatever, you'd go to a department store and they'd have a recording booth, and that would be what you record on, 15 cents or whatever, make one side of a record, and that's what would get you to, that was what would bring you the attention. You could take that to a radio station or a recording station and say, hey, this is potentially what our sound's going to be like, yada yada. It's the same process. It's just that you happen to be able to do it from your home without that minimal cost, and you could face the same obstacles. Like there's probably, for every Benny there's 10,000 Bennies.
Yeah.
So I would say it's almost harder in that way to be a musician now than it was before. But
someone to actually shine through all the other bullshit.
Yeah, but at the same time, there was still, you go to any secondhand store and you flick through a record by, Tucker Manfred or some random, some absolute no-name dude that has a record that was the fate of it, was to end up in some op shop, and he probably just worked in a steel mill for the rest of his life,
I wonder what, beside that question, in terms of how much people will be making from music on that sort of a scale, like the small end of the scale back in those days and the small end of the scale these days, whether there's actually more means to make money through even a small amount of work, or a lesser known artist through like an advertising or something like that.
I think you just get fucked in different ways. I think back in the day, you just get fucked by signing the wrong kind of contract, or not having any of your own publishing rights, or not having any business knowledge or savvy about how to distribute it. And there's a lot more, people paying off disc jockeys to play their records, or all that kind of stuff was still going on. It's probably still going on today, but it was still happening back in the day, where, there'd be people recording for, I don't know, some of those record companies in the 50s, 60s, R&B, black R&B groups, where a lot of the roots of modern music come from now. The rights are owned by, some old white guy who made millions of dollars off of it, and they made nothing. They got back in the day, they tried to trick you by giving you like a per diem or like a stipend at the start, and then you'd be like, oh, I'm rich, I've got, just give me $5,000, and but that's all you get. Like even back in the day, I listened to a podcast about it and then watched a documentary on it. The guy that created the Backstreet Boys also created NSYNC. He was the manager of both of them. His thought process was like, I've made the Backstreet Boys, they're like the biggest boy band of the 90s. Some rival is going to come along and challenge this, so it might as well be me. Like, I might as well make the next band and manage them both. So he did that and made NSYNC. But then it turned out he was screwing them, but he purposely created a rivalry between them so that they wouldn't talk to each other, so that they wouldn't have conversations with each other about their finances. They wouldn't be like, oh man, did you recognize that Lou's only giving us like $1,000, whatever?
Yeah.
And they ended up having this, the big crux of it, the whole thing. The guy ended up going to prison, I think, for fraud or something happened. But they had like this big dinner between like the members of NSYNC and their families, and they just had a #1 album and been on tour, and like they all thought like, this is it. This is when Lou's going to give us like our checks, and this is when we realize the fruit of everything we've gone for. And like they all get these envelopes, and the checks are for like $10,000 for like, a year's work, for like a year's work.
Jesus.
For the average Joe Blow on the normal 9 to 5 is making $40,000, they get $10,000 in a check, and they're making millions and millions of dollars, and they're like, oh, this is when it's, you know what I mean? So it's like those steps might not be as prominent now, because you don't necessarily have to go through that from, making a #1 record, quote unquote, in your bedroom, because you don't have to deal with some, fat greasy dude trying to muscle in on you. But at the same time, those fat greasy dudes existed in the market for a reason in the day, because they had those connections and they had that ability. Like,
yeah, for sure. That's so interesting. That makes sense too, because they're really similar groups. It would kind of make sense that they are sort of managed or created by the same.
Yeah,
thing.
This guy Lou Pearlman, he ended up making other groups too after he came out of prison, because his reputation was still so large. Because
do you know how long he was in prison for?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know if he ever did actually go to prison, to be honest. I'll have a look at it. But he just I think he just kind of screwed them all and then went away. I think he got exiled. He might have actually gone to prison, yeah, but he basically ended up having all these other like low key, way smaller, less successful. Like he kind of missed the boat by the time the boy band craze had kind of gone by then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that seems to sort of have swung back into effect through like One Direction and those sorts of things. I think boy bands are always something that's going to be popping, even though it's something cheesy. It seems to still come back into the limelight.
Okay, so this is what happened here. So Lou J. Pearlman was an American record producer. He's the creator of successful 1990s boy bands such as Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. In 2006, he was accused of running one of the largest and longest-running Ponzi schemes in history, leaving more than $300 million in debt. After being apprehended, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy, money laundering, and making false statements. And in 2008, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison, and then he died in federal custody in 2016. So $300 million on a Ponzi scheme, bro.
What is a Ponzi scheme?
Well, at its most basic form, right? A Ponzi scheme is a type of fraud, right? Where, say, I go up to you and I say, Kieran, I've got a really good business idea in the works, right? Or I've got an inside tip on some stocks. If you give me $5,000, I'll come back to you with a profit of, X amount of profit, 20% profit in a couple of months, right? And for some reason I get you to say yes. Then I go to Luke the next day and I go, Luke, if you give me $3,000, maybe not $3,000, maybe more, maybe $6,000, right? I can give you a profit back of X amount, 20% or even less, right? And then I take the money that Luke's given me and the money that you've accumulated together with me, it's $11,000. I wait a bit and I come back to you and I go, hey, Kieran, here's $7,000, bro. The 20% came through. It's going up and up and up. And then I say, bro, if you give me $10,000, we'll make $15,000 in 2 weeks. I'll come back to you with $15,000. You give me the $10,000. I go back to Luke and go, bro, here's $10,000. Like we're killing it. So basically, you just keep trading money in between people until the scheme gets larger. You go to your friends and go, hey, I just got
100,000.
Yeah. Basically, it gets bigger and bigger. Goes into the millions.
Shit.
You get your friends and say, oh, Liam, like, I gave him $5,000. He gave me $7,000 back. Like, if he comes up to you and asks you for money, fucking take
Do
it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what happens. And these guys do it with massive amounts of money. The biggest one that ever ran was a guy called Bernie Madoff. He stole billions of dollars. He's like the devil to celebrities, bro, because he targeted lots of celebrities, Hollywood celebrities. Like, they lost millions and millions of dollars, and lots of older people too, silly rich widowers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this is Bernie Madoff. So he was the chairman of the NASDAQ stock market. So he obviously had a bit of clout.
He should be under contract not to give information to anyone because he knows it.
Yeah, basically. So he's the confessed operator of the largest Ponzi scheme in world history. Prosecutors estimated the fraud to be worth $64.8 billion.
Christ.
Based on the amount in the accounts of Madoff's 4,800 clients as of November 30, 2008.
Wow.
So he's 82. His son was involved too, like his whole family was involved.
That's
but I think, bro. So he forfeited $18 billion when he got arrested. He probably still had a lot more. His family would have kept guess how many years in prison he got?
Less than 5?
No. A lot of years.
Oh, okay. We're talking the opposite end of the scale.
150 years.
150 years.
He's 82.
Not so long.
Bye-bye.
His bro, like he fully went
So by
in.
the same means as you explained, he was flipping money around.
Yeah, same thing.
And it happens everywhere. Like the most recent example in Dunedin, Barry Clue, or
Barry Clue.
A recent example, I should say. I saw there was a flat on McLagan Street which he owned up for sale, and all the items had been surrendered.
Yeah.
Like he owned properties. I think the way he got picked up in Dunedin was he tried to buy a property, and whenever you try to buy a property nowadays, they
do an audit.
They look into where your funds come from, and he failed.
Couldn't account for a whole bunch of it, eh?
Yeah, he failed the audit or the anti-money laundering verification. So
yeah,
yeah,
and it's It's a dangerous
Sleazy
game.
folk, yeah.
But yeah, the Ponzi scheme was named after Charles Ponzi. He's an Italian guy in 1920. In the 1920s, he started doing it.
That's pretty early on.
Yeah, well, I think that would have been when it would have been a lot easier to get away with it back then because people wouldn't have had constant
Not
contact
so
with
much
each other,
inside,
and
yeah.
you could travel, you could leave, you could run away.
Right. Managers, man. Do it yourself.
So this is according to the Security and Exchange Commission in the United States. These are the signs, the warning signs, the red flags of a Ponzi scheme.
Oh, really?
Yeah, high investment returns with little to no risk. So like I said,
Yeah,
if I
right,
came up to you and said,
Damn,
bro,
it's
this
here.
is a guarantee,
Let's do it.
I've got the money for you in 2 weeks with
Yeah.
interest.
Mm-hmm.
Overly consistent returns. So that's it, the same thing. Me going like, bro, like keep coming back to me. I've just got it for you. The money's just picking up. Unregistered investments. So like, yeah, me saying, oh, there's an underground medical marijuana company coming up in Queenstown. They're trading on the International Stock Exchange. You can't find it or it's unregistered. Yeah, just lots of things like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, because in some parts of the Ponzi scheme, I think a lot of the times when they unravel is that as the scheme gets larger, the focus tends to stay on the people who are providing the largest amount of money. So like, you know, if you're starting to funnel billions of dollars to me, I'm going to obviously be wanting to cover my bet by focusing on your investment of billions of dollars. Whereas that base person at the very base, at the start again, who's invested $5,000, it might not be a large amount in the grand scheme of things, but to that person, it's a massive amount of money. And that's somebody who's going to pursue criminal investigation over a small amount of money. You know what I mean? Like if it was an investment of somebody who's investing billions of dollars with me and I lose them $10,000, they might be like, that's a lot of money to us. But to them, they're going to be like, it was $10,000 on $1 billion investment. Somebody with $5,000 that was really looking for $10,000 and doesn't have $5,000 to lose is going to really chase you for it, you know? But those, it's a surprisiprisingly simple scheme in terms of like, you know,
The way you put it, yeah.
the way
If it works like that in theory.
the way that it works. But that's obviously what kind of puts the dagger in it is that it's very simple and there's not a lot of ways to hide your tracks once you've been
Yeah,
exposed.
for sure. Yeah, and like you say, especially these days, there's more insight, more people in on it, I suppose.
Yeah.
More people that could have more insight.
Yeah. I guess, and just you start living more lavishly, you know, like the more money you get, that's obviously the double-edged sword of the whole scenario is that the more money you get, the harder it becomes to contain the fact that your lifestyle has become more opulent.
Yeah.
But if you start gathering more money, you almost can't just sit on it. You can't not launder it or you can't not fence it because then...
The personality that's going to want to launder or falsely obtain money is not just going to want to humbly set that aside for their children. They're going to want the Rolls Royce, the Rolex watch,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
the nice house.
And it's also the same kind of, you know, the same kind of thought process of like, say, a murderer. You know, you're not gonna kill somebody and bring the murder weapon home with you. Do you know what I mean? So in their mind, it's like, I'm not going to steal all of this money and leave it in my house and live the humble lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because then someday when it comes all tumbling down on me, they're going to find the money in my house or
Yeah.
in some account. Like,
So you're almost building trust through the process as well by actually supplying the other party with stuff rather than sort of hoarding it all for your own.
basically,
Yeah.
and implicate other people because then you can say, it wasn't me, it was, you know,
Such.
it was the CEO. I'm just
Yeah.
the chairman.
Yeah,
It wasn't me.
I'm just the oversight.
I had no idea, you know. It's like with the Barry Clue thing, you know. A lot of people say, you know, we were shocked. Such a nice man, yada. Generally, and I'm sure to a lot of people he probably was like that. But at the same
A
time,
lot of
there's
his friends.
there's a lot of his friends that would have known that he was doing shady shit. Like,
Yeah, and a lot of his friends, he probably was in a circle of friends maybe who knew what was going on.
100%.
And other friends who he, you know, told to invest in him and took their money and there was no investment. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Serious Fraud Office investigated him because I was working at the Chamber of Commerce when that had happened. And when the Serious Fraud Office comes in, they confiscate all your shit ASAP. It's different from the police coming in. Like if the police come in, they'll arrest you and they'll have warrants to search everything. Whereas the Serious Fraud Office will just come in and they'll unplug all of your computers. And they'll take all your accounting books. They'll take all your logs. They'll take everything. They'll track your IP data for, you know, a couple of weeks before they come in on a raid. and they won't actually arrest you physically. So that's like what happened with Berkeley. I think he left Dunedin, he went to Christchurch and was like,
Just to backtrack for myself and perhaps people listening that don't know, I'm not aware of the full story of this Barry Clue fellow.
Yeah.
What was the story in a nutshell?
He's a financial advisor or someone involved in finance, so would typically
comes from a rich family in Dunedin.
Would typically take money off someone and invest that in a portfolio for a set amount of return or an expected return.
Okay.
And usually you would take your client's money and invest that and take a portion of that return as your income and benefit the client with return on their money. So I believe in this case, Barry was taking clients' money and
paying other clients back with it.
So basically a Ponzi scheme,
scheme.
And taking a large chunk for himself to live a
Sure.
rather lavish
Okay.
lifestyle.
So it's all that same principles. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's like, it gets harder because, you do things like you tie up investments in other people's names. Like Michael Swan, the guy who defrauded the hospital in Dunedin about 12, 13 years ago, was married to, I'm not going to mention their name because I can mention Michael Swan because he's a convicted criminal, but I won't mention the other person. The other person who he was in a partnership with came from a rich Dunedin family who already had their own assets. So they had things under his partner's name, which became, once Michael Swan was prosecuted for his crimes, became difficult to separate those assets from the assets that he had obtained illegally because they could justify it by saying, I have the means to purchase this because I come from, wealth, or I already have financial assets myself, so you can't legally determine that I didn't purchase this boat and not Michael,
Right. No backtracking. Yeah.
But in reality, he would have and put it on her name because he would have been like, someday I might get, arrested. It's like Derek Chauvin, the policeman who killed George Floyd. His wife is divorcing him. And a lot of people were saying that one of the reasons that they got separated is because if they got separated, she was entitled to his benefits as a Minneapolis police officer, his pension, if he got prosecuted for a crime.
Right.
So if they got divorced before a certain date, she was the recipient of his. Because I think the way the police unions have it in the States is even if you get convicted of a crime, you're, as part of the police union's agreement with the cities, you're still entitled to your pension as a police officer. It's pretty broken, but it's just the way it is, I think.
Oh,
so
that's interesting.
They kind of tried to finagle it and maneuver so that she could receive the benefits.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of maneuvering, but he's screwed. He'll be in isolation if he's convicted. He'll be living on his own in prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that's a pretty sad end to it all.
Phenomenon, that police officer.
Oh, not only is he a police officer, but he's a police officer who has historically changed the United States. If you go to prison as a police officer in the United States, they're probably already giving you protection or giving you a scenario where you don't have to interact with you can interact with as little other inmates as possible.
Yeah, true,
but this guy hasn't, because you're
putting people behind.
because you're putting
you're going. Behind,
exactly.
whoa.
And this guy is the ultimate pig, quote unquote. This guy is the ultimate
irony,
person that they'd want to be going for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, funny.
So-
he would die most.
100% he would. He wouldn't be living in a general population prison at all. He'd be in a forced ISO.
Interesting. And just because he's a police officer, not due to any. Yeah.
No, because he's a police officer, he'd already be entitled to that, at a certain point. But also because he's the police officer who killed George Floyd. So
Yeah.
How big that has been.
yeah, well, it's
Massive.
like the guy who shot John Lennon. He's been in prison for 40 years now. He's had parole a lot of times, and he's tried to apply for parole. In a level of, I guess, assumed kind of sanity, like it's been 40 years and he's not he's not legally, I don't think a parole board wouldn't see him as a threat to murder any other celebrities now or to shoot anybody in the street like he did for John Lennon, but they probably wouldn't release him for his own safety. Even though it's 40 years later, there'd be people who would be looking to kill the person who killed John Lennon just so they could be the person that killed John Lennon. Killed John Lennon's murderer. You know.
Yeah, that's a pretty scary thought to think that people are that. Obviously, it's a terrible crime to commit, but people that are still, like you say, 40 years down the track are still wound up in it, that they would be on the tail of this person, that they will back out on the streets again. They're aware of the situation and know where he is to be right.
Yeah. And it's the clout
revenge
too.
time.
It's the clout.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
You took down the guy that took down this guy.
Yeah, so the guys who killed X, right? It's
Yeah.
like, he was asking people to challenge him or whatever, like whether it justifies him being shot, it doesn't. But he was saying, come, I'm going to be here in this state, in this time, I'm going to be at this car dealership, come down and see what's up. And then the guys come down and kill him,
That's so weird, man. And that's what I can't believe hasn't happened with 6ix9ine, because he has been saying that ever since he's been popular, like, I want all the smoke, like whoever wants to say something to me can say it to me. But then Pop Smoke posts his address once and is dead like that day or the next day. You know? It's just...
But that's the thing, bro, is that Tekashi 6ix9ine is probably... He's not about that life at all.
No,
like he's the kind of guy that's playing that he is about that life, and Pop Smoke probably was. Nipsey Hussle, he wasn't obviously going out being like, come cat me.
Yeah.
But like he was living in those communities and doing face-to-face work and actually in those communities to be interacting with those, brushing up against those people every day.
Yeah.
So they would have seen him more than once, the people that killed him and the people that would have been, contemplating being involved in killing him, whatever, It's not somebody who wants clout that lives ages away from you or is like, oh man, maybe I should kill Tekashi 6ix9ine. It's your neighbors, it's your friends, it's your family. Marvin Gaye, it was his own dad, like.
Yeah, that's
like
a pretty tragic story.
Yeah. Stuff like that, man, But, yeah, I mean, live the life, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, as they say.
That's right. Anything to conclude, Luke?
Yeah, no, it's pretty grim thoughts there.
Yeah, it is.
But anyway, to the listening audience, I'm going to be out on George Street every day this week. So
come see me.
Yeah, if you want to bring the smoke, I'll be there. But.
Talking about silly games and silly prizes, the UFC would be another example of that. There are humans out there who fight for pieces of gold to put around their waist.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is pretty beautiful to watch sometimes, a good fight, professional, but it's part of nature again to
win the gold. Yeah, and the
Clout.
belt will probably be so overly, made the way it is that it is more of a reward when you get it.
You don't want to someone just give you some little gold chain,
someone out and they're
some
like,
medallion,
here's a little leather belt for you.
And here's your little check. Also, why do you think those checks in golf are so fucking huge? It's like have any of us ever held one of those? How fucking sick would it be to hold one of those, bro?
Yeah.
Take that into the bank, like
you're like, hey, I just won this motherfucking check. Check this out.
Yeah.
cash this for me.
Yeah, like I lucked out. I've never played golf before in my life. Like I got completely lucky.
A smart game with some pretty big prizes.
Yeah, but
Yeah, no, it's been pretty good chats, I feel.
Yeah, that was good, man. We've done, what have we done? Under 2 hours. That was solid.
is it 2 hours? I told you
almost.
time would fly. Eh?
Yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah, cool.
It does.
All right, well, thanks, Luke. I appreciate you coming on. This was
Thank
a
you,
fantastic
Kieran.
chat. I'll definitely
First
have you
ever
on again.
podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you're welcome back anytime. And same to you, Liam. This is number 3 for you. But I'm sure we'll have plenty of you back in the
My
future.
cheeks in the mail, isn't it?
Oh, that last one's still getting that drawn up for you. I'm actually getting it printed on a big check.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want it golf size, or I don't want it at all,
We'll have it
motherfucker.
on the wall there for you. Walk down the stairs with it. Yeah.
Sweet.
Cool, boys. Thanks very much for coming on. Appreciate you.
Peace and chicken
All right.
grease.
Bye, everyone.
Peace.
What a wrap up that was. That was dope.
That was awesome.
Oh, my ears are hot.